Yeah, hi folks. Well, it appears our deceitful, lying, cheating left-wing snowflakes are at it again. And they have to cheat because that's the only way they can get people to buy into their communist ideals. And that shooting in Colorado is a classic example of that cheating. But luckily, it's easy to connect the dots.
The Boulder mass murder. There is the accused shooter, Ahmed Al-Alawi Alissa, 21 years old. He came here as a Syrian refugee. He arrived during President Obama's asylum program. Here are the victims, 10 people, ages 20 through 65.
Yeah, Brenton Tarrant kills Muslims and it's terrorism. This Muslim shoots white people and it's, for some reason, not terrorism. At least at this point.
Do you think that President Biden will be going to Boulder to honor those lost? I hope he does, but the politics suggest that he will not, and the optics of this entire situation. For a review, here's this.
A shooting rampage at this Colorado grocery store, leaving multiple people dead, including a Boulder police officer. Thousands watching this live stream by ZFG Videography as the events were unfolding.
There's a shooter, active shooter, get away!
The call coming in around 2:30 p.m.
136, hold all radio traffic, everybody just go.
Law enforcement rushing to the parking lot of the King Soopers grocery store. At just about 3:30 p.m., police with long guns escorting this man, shirtless, with blood running down his leg. Leading him to a stretcher, he appears to be in handcuffs.
So, he's a Trump hater, by the way, reportedly, and let's go through some of his posts, the alleged shooter here. On Facebook, he says, Trump, such a DIC, you know the word. Next, the Muslims at the Christchurch Mosque, I believe that was in New Zealand, were not the victims of a single shooter. They were the victims of the entire Islamophobia industry that vilified them.
Yeah, there's a red flag right there, but it's not terrorism.
Next, he inherited a growing economy and the unemployment rate was low. The economy was an upward spiral. He won, Donald Trump, because of racism.
Yeah, so why does he blame racism? Well, it's because he's been brainwashed by left-wing politicians and the media to believe that lie.
Also, looking at his internet postings, we know that he's a fan of the Washington Post. Now, here's how one leading liberal saw the events in her mind. This is what she wrote before she knew the identity of the assailant. The shooter was taken into custody. In other words, it was almost certainly a white man. Again, if he were black or brown, he would be dead. Now, when they updated her, when she was informed, she wrote this. Let's mourn the victims, but not glorify the killer with the intention of having his name widely known.
Yeah, so hide the truth.
And then there's this from Mina Harris. Recognize the woman next to her on the left? That is the Vice President of the United States. She is the niece of Vice President Harris. The Atlanta shooting was not even a week ago. Violent white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. Now, when she learns the truth, she updates it with this. Arguably even worse. I deleted a previous tweet about the suspect in the Boulder shooting. I made an assumption based on his being taken into custody alive and the fact that the majority of mass shootings in the U.S. are carried out by white men. Now, a quick review by anybody, you'll see that all kinds of people are responsible for horrific domestic terror attacks in this country, including plenty of people of color.
Yeah, so why do they jump the gun and blame white people? Well, that's because it evokes Trump supporters or white supremacists, which makes it easier for the following to be marketed.
Less than 24 hours after that deadly shooting at the Boulder, Colorado supermarket, The Democrats are moving to capitalize off the death and despair like they always do. By mid-morning today, Joe Biden started calling for what else? A, quote, assault weapons ban.
I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps. We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
Now, does that remind you of anyone?
New Zealand will ban all military-style semi-automatic weapons. We will also ban all assault rifles. We will ban all high-capacity magazines.
And of course, it's all about safety, isn't it?
So I got to wonder, like, why, if somebody does something horrible in Boulder, does that mean you need to strip from people the single most popular sporting rifle in America, the one that commits relatively few crimes? I mean, more people are killed by a factor of 5 by knives than by rifles in this country. Why are they so intent on taking this one firearm away?
Because honestly, if you really look at it, a lot of people like to undervalue what the Second Amendment was actually written for, and it was designed to be a check against the government. A lot of people don't like to talk about that aspect. Of course, it was also there to allow us to defend ourselves. But if you think about it, the AR-15 symbolically and literally is the best defense against a tyrannical government.
Exactly.
And then not only that, it serves as an excellent precursor for them to then inevitably get to the point where they really want to get to, which is essentially the handguns. See, they can sell the whole idea of the AR-15 needing to be banned because it's evil and it's only meant for killing, as they like to say, which is not true. And so once they get that, and then as you pointed out, it represents such a minor aspect of gun violence in this country, then we have another shooting that happens, which it will, and then they'll go ahead and use that to justify further restricting our rights again. And so they'll take a little bit at a time, wait for another tragedy, and take a little bit more after that.
Yeah, until all the guns are gone. And I wonder who is driving all this.
Basically, we were turned into what I like to call sheep. We were there ripe for the picking for both by criminal and the government.
Carlos Santillan, now an American citizen, remembers all too well the freedoms he and his family were denied. Growing up in the Philippines, where Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law, putting honest citizens at the mercy of his dictatorship, ordering them to register their firearms, and then forcing them to turn them in.
This is my brother and my father. They're in Mexico here.
For Joseph DeSoto, a flight to freedom is what brought his family here. Photos of relatives, a constant reminder, he says, of how his ancestors, an entire village, was betrayed and massacred by the Mexican government, a government that promised to protect them from armed rebels and marauders.
The reason my family is here in the United States now is that my relatives were exterminated by government forces which were in the northern part of Mexico to protect the ranchers and the villagers. Well, they disarmed the ranchers, they disarmed the villagers, and 3 days later they killed all the men.
The harsh lessons of history never learned, where the loss of liberty is paid for in the loss of innocent lives, a tragedy that continues to be played out today. In England, Australia, Canada, and South Africa, where firearms have been banned, rounded up, and surrendered to the saw blade and blast furnace, crime has skyrocketed.
The facts are simply armed crime's gone up, and more firearms are being imported into England illegally.
Once upon a time, people's houses would be broken in when they weren't home. What's happening today is that the offender, the bad guys, are happy to break into somebody's house. They're not frightened to break into somebody's house while they're at home.
Gun bans that have backfired, but governments refusing to admit it. Instead, these same countries are now conspiring with the United Nations, insisting that the only way to combat the illegal possession of firearms is to restrict, reduce, and ultimately remove legally owned firearms from law-abiding citizens. The UN's agenda? To impose its own standard of freedom, global gun prohibition.
Ah, yes, our global communists. Who would have thought? Yeah, now folks, that video was from 2009, but the UN has been pushing for global gun control since the 90s. So clearly Ardern and Biden would like nothing better, as they are both puppets of the UN. They are global communists, after all.